So the Parsha this week is Parshat Toldot, and in Parshat Toldot we learn basically two fundamental sugyas. Mechiras HaBechorah, the beginning of the Parsha. When Yaakov Avinu buys the Bechorah from Esav, and in the continuation of the Parsha, the Brochas. And almost every year, Parshat Toldot, we deal with different facets, different aspects of Mechiras HaBechorah. So all the great Gedolim, the Rosh, the Tur, Tshuvas HaRivash, Tzos HaChoshen Reish Ayin Ches, all dealt with this purchase, this transition from the halachic perspective. Eino da makna dove shalei b'li yolam. How could Esav sell? How could Yaakov buy Bechorah as long as Yitzchak is still alive? Kal godel b'yadeinu eino da makna dove shalei b'li yolam. Today we have Pirush Torah ala Torah, which is relatively new from Ksav Yad. The Achronim didn't have this sefer, at least most of them. The Rivash writes, I saw Ksav Yad from the Torah, and I'm not even confident that it is the Torah, but today we do know, yes, it is the Torah. And he brings an interesting argument to explain the validity of this purchase, of this transaction. Based on the Gemara, that if a person sells Mashe Irash Ma'abo Hayoim Mochalacho, Mashe Tala Mitzidosi Hayoim Mochalacho, then the Kinyan is valid. Mishum Kedei Chayav. And that's at Konas Chachamim. What the Gemara means to say is this: if a person sells my future inheritance, that's the Voram B'Telem. It's a Davar Shel Abol Yolim. If he sells, I have nets out in the ocean, out in the river, so the fish that I will catch tomorrow, I sell you right now? No. Botle Mevutal, it's a Davar Shel Abol Yolim. But if he sells Mashatalam Tzidosi Ayoim, whatever my nets will bring up today, Masha'irish Ma'abayom, if Chas v'Sholom my father passed away today, and I will have a Yerushatei, that is what I sell you, it is valid. And why is that? It's a special takana, Mishum Kedei Chayav. A person doesn't sell what he will catch today. He doesn't sell what I might inherit today unless he is in desperation, unless he really needs the money. And that is why Tiknu Chachamim, that yes, the purchase is valid and the money is his. So the Tur goes on and he says that is why Yaakov says, Michlo kayoim es becharos choli, hayoim. But what Yaakov really has in mind is, agav, greirer b'kinyonim. If the kinyan is valid regarding hayoim, it also is valid in the broader sense in the entire package of Bechorah. So this brings us to a fundamental question. Do we say Gerira b'kinyanim? How do we relate to a kinyan in which a person puts together two different things? One is fitting to be transferred by the kinyan, and the other is not. Two things thrown together in the same package. One of the two, ra'ui lekinyan. The other, eineno ra'ui lekinyan. How do we relate to a situation like this? Do we say kinyan shabbat le'mekzos shabbat le'kula? And because the kinyan is invalid partially, it is totally invalid? Maybe the other way around. If it is partially valid, it is totally valid, and it's chal even on those things she'ein ha'kinyan ra'ui lachul alayhem? Or do we say, lav ha'bahatalya? What does one have to do with the other? The kinyan is chal kishe ra'ui lachul. It's not chal kishe nenu ra'ui lachul. So in our journey today, we will visit 9 different sites, 9 sugyas. And then we'll come back to number 1, which ultimately will be number 10, Mechiras HaBechorah. Number 1 is Bava Basa Kuf Mem Gimel, Kni'at V'chamor. A person sells property, he sells something, and he tells the person, You get 50% and my donkey gets 50%. Interesting. At v'chamor. I'm selling to you and to my mule, or my elephant, or my dog, or whatever it is. Kinyat v'chamor. Rav Amnuna says, Lo kono klum. The kinyan is totally invalid. It's a joke. Rav Sheshes omer kono hakoil. The human being gets 100%. Rav Nachman says he gets half. One part is not dependent on the other. The donkey gets nothing, goes without saying, and the person gets 50%. 50% that was designated for him. How do we understand the other two opinions? Rav Hamnuna says le kona klum, Rav Sheshes says kona hakoil. Halochik Rav Nachman bedina. Rav Nachman says 50%. I think it goes without saying, this sugya is not based on a hilchase. Kinyan shabot lemektzosei bot lekula. We do find a similar concept in the Dorm Dav Chav Zayin regarding Nedorim, Neder shabot lemektzosei bot lekula. I think all three opinions are based on an evaluation. What did the person have in mind when he says such a strange and stupid thing, kniyat v'chama? What does he have in mind? Rav Amnuna says, what he has in mind is to just make fun of you. And he really doesn't mean to give away anything. If he really wanted to give you anything, he wouldn't put you together with a donkey. He's just making fun of you, and he doesn't mean anything. And that is why lo kono klum. Rav Sheshes evaluation. Rav Sheshes says no. Why he speaks about a donkey, we don't know. Strange. Maybe he thinks it's funny. He has a strange sense of humor. But obviously what he really wants is to give you the entire package. He knows that a donkey can have a kinyan. Rav Nachman says, Tofasto morubo, loy tofasto. And our guess is, those 50% that he designated to you are yours. The other 50% are his. Nobody argues that the donkey would get 50%. A donkey can't have bailus, doesn't have ownership. So this is sugya number one, which brings us to sugya number two. Kedushin daf nun alef omed alef, also quoted in Bava Basra Kuf Mem Gimel. HaMekadesh chomesh noshim bekalkola shel Peres. He was Mekadesh 5 women. That was way before Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. So a person could have as many wives as he wished. He's Mekadesh chomesh noshim. And one of the 5 is a shliach of all the others. 2 of those 5 happen to be sisters. And it's a chois isho. That's an erva. So the Gemara says, Ein ha'achiyos mikudoshois. And the Gemara says, so the sisters are not mikudish. That means the other 3 are mikudish. And why is that different than kniyat v'chamor? Shaloi kona klum. What's the kasha? The Rambam Perek Chov Beis Memechir Aloch Yud Beis Paskins Kerav Nachman. Kniyat v'chamor, the guy gets 50%. So what's the kasha about chomesh achiyos? According to Rav Nachman, we should say exactly what the Mishnah says. The 3 others are mekudish, and the 2 that cannot be mekudish are not. The Gemara answers the kasha. He said, Hara'uyas mikem mikudoshois li. He clearly specified that I don't mean to mekadesh all the 5. Those that could be mekudish to me should be. And it is only for that reason that we say, Ein achiyos mekudoshois, but the others are. So the Rif doesn't bring Hara'uyos mikem, and the Ran explains. The entire kasha is only valid according to Rav Amnuna. Rav Amnuna. If we paskin Rav Nachman, then the kasha doesn't begin in the first place. That's why the Rif doesn't bring the teretz. But the pele is the Rambam does bring the teretz, and the Rambam says, "Hamakadosh chomesh noshim va'omer hara'uyos bechem mekudoshos li." It is only then that the 3 are mekudish. If he wouldn't say that, none would be mekudish. So it's a stira in Rambam. Ad v'chamor, the Rambam paskins kono machatza, and by Kedushin, none of them is mekudish unless he specified that uyis bechem mekudoshos li. So the Maggid Mishnah says, according to the Rambam's understanding, it's not the same. It's not the same. When a person says, At v'chamor, you get 50% and the donkey gets 50%, it is clear that he doesn't mean it. You don't need to be very bright and you don't need to have a high IQ to know that a donkey has no ownership. So he's just joking. But a person says, Chomish Noshem Mekudoshes Li, maybe he doesn't know that it can be Mekadosh Deyachios, and therefore he does intend to be Mekadosh all of them, all or none. And that's the kasha of the Gemara. The Ran, similar to the Maggid Mishnah, but slightly different. The Ran differentiates between a moicher and a lekech, between a seller and a buyer. So when a person sells and he wants to sell to two people, we say, why would one be dependent on the other? So he sells to you and to the mule, to the animal. So the animal can be koine, but why wouldn't the person be koine? But a purchaser, a buyer, maybe he wants to buy the entire package. It's everything or nothing. And that is why Mekadosh Chumashachiyos is more room to say, Ha b'ha talya. So these are two sugyas. Both sugyas are based on the way we assess and evaluate what people have in mind. It's not a halacha la Moshe Messinai botla mektosa botla kula that like we find by Nedorim. It's just, what did he have in mind when he said the five of you should be Makudish? What did he have in mind when he says you and the mule should be kind a house or whatever it is? But there is a sugya number 3, and that's in Guten Daf Chesumet Beis, Gittin Chesumet Beis. When a person wrote a shtar to a zeved, and in that same shtar he's meshachrer, and he also gives him gifts. And the gifts are not chal, because we don't know what he had in mind. Does that invalidate the shichrur as well? And the Gemara brings a machlokes. Palgin and debura or lo palgin and debura. And the Rishonim make it very clear, primarily the Ran. It's not the same as palgin and debura. In Yevomis, Chof Aleph, in Sanhedrin Daf Tes, in Makes Daf Vav. In those sources, palgin and debura is dealing with edus, with testimony. Is a person namon partially on what he says? Or do we say, if you don't believe him, you cannot believe him at all? In our sugya, in Gittin Daf Ches, shtar shebotla mektosa botla kulo. And if this shtar is partially bottle, it's totally bottle. But maybe that is only bishtar, because a shtar is a document. And either it's valid or it's not valid, and we can't break it up in two and say, the kinyan shebishtar is chal lachatzoin. So that is sugya number 3. Now we start examining divrei harashonim v'apoiskim. Number 4. Mordechai Bava Basa Tov Reish quoted Shulchan Aruch Reish Gimel Sif Yud in the Ramah. Kinyan Sudar, also known as Kinyan Chalifin, is chal, karka, and metaltanen, but not money. Madbeya einoi nikne b'chalifin. Today we can't discuss why. By the nature of things, if I speak about 10 sources, we cannot elaborate too much on any of the 10. But that is a very simple halacha. Bav Metzia Mem Zayin. Madbeya layavda uchilap meidreya lo nikna b'chalifin. So a person used kinyan suda to sell or to buy karka, metaltalen, money. Suda is not valid regarding money, but it is valid regarding karka, metaltalen. How do we deal with a kinyan like this? 3 opinions. One opinion is, like kniyat v'chamor, botla mektosa, botla kulo. And he has nothing, not even the karka and the metaltalen. Once again, the Achronim ask, but bakniyat v'chamor dalochas kirev Nachman, kono machatza. In the Hagos, quoting Maralma Prague, these Rishonim maintain halacha kirev Nuna, Rav Hamnuna, loy kono klum. Because that's Stoma de Gemara in Kedushin Daf Nun Aleph. But that's one opinion. Nothing. The other opinion is exactly the other way around. Because the kinyan is valid regarding karka metaltanen, it's chal and mois. Contrary to kniyat v'chamor. a chamor can never have a kinyan. Contrary to shtei achiyos, because you can in no way be mekadesh shtei achiyos. It's an erva. But in the case of karka metaltel and a mois, the Mordechai brings an opinion. Because the kinyan is chal on karka metaltel and it's chal on mois as well. Rabbeinu Simcha is in the middle of the road. And Rabbeinu Simcha says, Masha ra'ui ra'ui, Masha loy ra'ui lo ra'ui. And kinyan suda is valid regarding karka metaltel and it's invalid regarding mois. The Ramah, as I said, Reish Gimel Yud quotes all three opinions and he's not machriya beineihem. Number 5, Gittin Daf Chav Beis. An interesting question the Gemara deals with. Otzitz Nakuv. Otzitz Nakuv, flower pot with a hole, has a din of mechubel karka. And whatever is planted in that bowl, in that flower pot, is mechubel karka, lagabe tzumas hamaises, lagabe kol adinim shel mitzvahs atluyis ba'oretz. What type of a kinyan does a person make to be kohen in otzitz nakuv? So the plant is mechubel karka, dinoike karka. But the otzitz, the flower pot, is metaltalin. That's not mechubel karka. So he needs to make meshicha on the flower pot and chazaka on the plant. So what is the din if he only made meshicha on the flower pot and he intended to purchase the plant, but the kinyan he made is not valid regarding the plant? Tosfos says, well, he purchased a flower pot and that's his, but the plant not yet. The Ran says no. As long as he doesn't get the plant, he has no interest in a flower pot. What does he want to do with a flower pot? Is he going to take the plant out and have the pot? He could just go and buy a pot, buy a dish. So Tosfos says, Masha kona kona, masha loy kona loy kona. The Ran says no. Mikivan sheloy kona is a zroim, loy kona is a otzitz. Comes along the Bach, Reish Beis. And it's an amazing chiddush of the Bach. The Bach says, Mekivan shekona otzitz kone nami zroim. He's kone the otzitz with Mashiach because it's metaltalin. And that kinyan Mashiach would also be valid regarding the plant, even though the plant dinoike karka. Shach Sif Kotten Bey says, Ein ledovar tam. He doesn't make sense. And I wonder why neither the Bach nor the Shach says, well, this halacha should be totally dependent on the halacha that we see in Reish Gimel. So the machlokes Bach and Shach is Reish Beis. But in Reish Gimel, Sif Kotten Yud, Sif Yud, the Ramah brings 3 opinions. So why would Mashiach on the Otzitz and Zroam be different than Kinyan Sudar on Karka, Metaltalin, and Mois? L'chorah, this question is totally dependent on that question. So the Shach could still argue, Halocha ke Rabbeinu Simcha. Halocha ke Rabbeinu Simcha. Kona Karka v'Metaltalin v'loi kona Mois. Kona Otzitz v'loi kona Zroim. But why did the Bach and the Shach ignore the most relevant source? Which to me it seems, Hainu Hach Mamish. It is the same argumentation, the same svara. Source number 6. Reishtet Siv Daled. The Ramah brings a machlokes. When a person makes one kinyan, Dover Shaboli Yolim v'Dover Shaloi Boli Yolim. How do we relate to this? Do we say Dover Shaboli Yolim Kona, Dover Shaloi Bolim Loi Kona? Or do we say because the kinyan is Chal on Boli Yolim, it is also Chal on Loi Boli Yolim? Is this Ramah and Reish Tes dependent on the other Ramah that we quoted before in Reish Gimel? So in Reish Gimel, the Ramah deals with the question, Kinyan Sudar, Karka v'Metaltalin, yes. Mois, no. And the Ramah brings 3 different opinions. Is it the same when the person makes the same kinyan Dover Shaboli Yolim, Dover Shaloi Boli Yolim? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Noide B'Yudah Madura Kama Choshe Mishpat Simachov Tes says, well, it's different than Kniyat V'Chamor. Kniyat V'Chamor, everybody knows that a donkey can have bailes, but this is different. Yes, But it is different. Is it different than kinyan sudar, bekarka metaltelen v'mois? It is different. There might be a difference between kinyan sudar and kinyan mashicha ba'otzitz v'zroim. These two sources are mamish the same. They both deal with a kinyan which is fitting for one thing, not fitting for the other thing. But even that other thing is a bar kinyan. It is a bar kinyan. But you need another kinyan. But Dover Shel Bolyonim is not a bar kinyan. Kalal. No kinyan would be valid by Dover Shel Bolyonim. Eino demakna Dover Shel Bolyonim. It's not a problem with this specific kinyan. It's not attainable. It's not purchasable. You can't be koina Dover Shel Bolyonim. And therefore there's more reason to say maybe mid the bottle legabe high, it's not reasonable to the same degree to say mid the kona high. It would be different than Suda. By Suda there's more room to argue. If the Suda is chal on karka v'metaltelen, maybe it's also chal on mois. If kinyan mashiach is chal on the otzitz, maybe we would say that the zroim is nigrar achrei otzitz and it goes along. And that brings us to sugya number 7. So Rabbeinu Simcha, dealing with the story of kinyan sudar, kinyan chalip, and karka, metaltelen, mois. So one of the three opinions is greira. Kinyan shekayim mektsasoi, kayim kuloi. Not botla mektsasoi, botla kuloi. The other way around. Rabbeinu Simcha says there is no greira bekinyanim. There is no such a thing. There is no positive greira bekinyanim. How does he prove it? Kinyan agav. So kinyan agav in Kedushin Dav Chavav, nachosim shesh lamachayis, nachosim shein lamachayis, niknemim nachosim shesh lamachayis. One of the methods of kinyan metaltalin is agav karka. When you're koine karka, you're koine metaltalin agav karka. And the Gemara says, but that is only if you stated explicitly, I want to be koine the metaltalin agav karka. If you didn't say that, you're not koine. Asks Rabbeinu Simcha, if there's greater bekinyonim, why does he need to say that? Why doesn't it work regardless whether he said or not? Just like kinyan sudar is chalan mois agav karka v'metaltalin, why wouldn't we say kesef shtar v'chazaka is chal an metaltalin agav karka? This brings us to a fundamental discussion of kinyan agav. So I wrote a siman on kinyan agav many, many years ago, and I was surprised to discover that it was never printed. Never before was it printed. So 15 years ago, I wrote a kuntres, Minchas Osha Torres HaKinyonim, which is it's a collector's item today. And I wrote at great length about Kinyonim, Minchas Osha Bava Basa, and Kiddushin. But this siman always escaped my attention. And this week, first time ever, it's going to be Nachlas Harabim. I'm happy to tell you all that this week, Madura Basra Minchas Osha and Kiddushin is coming out. And it's a Simcha Gedola. Every new sefer is a Simcha Gedola. And for the first time, the world, the Torah world, my Talmidim will see what I wrote about Kinyan Agav. And I wrote 2 fundamental approaches to Kinyan Agav. How does it work? Do we say Kesef Shtar V'Chazaka is only koine karka, and the metaltalin hitchhikes, piggybacks, on the karka? And you acquire the metaltalin without any kinyan at all. Because when metaltalin goes along with karka, you don't need to do a kinyan on the metaltalin. Or would we suggest a different interpretation? Kesef Shtar V'Chazaka aren't koine metaltalin, they're only koine karka. But when you're koine metaltalin agav karka, those kinyonei karka are also chal on the metaltalin. And it's not that you're getting the metaltalin a bonus without a kinyan. It's rather, you're koine metaltalin agav karka bekesef shtar v'chazok. Rabbeinu Simcha's understanding is the second one. And therefore he says, if there's greater b'kinyonim, why does it need to say agav? Even if he doesn't say agav, yes, greater. His Balei Plukta would say, no, you didn't get it right. Kinyan agav is not that the kinyan, kesef shavach hazukah, is chal on the metaltalin. No, you get the metaltalin without a kinyan at all. And therefore, it has nothing to do with the greater. So that is sugya number 7. 8, 9, 10. Coming back to the Ran, regarding otzitz and zroim. So Tosfos says, if he's not koine the zroim, he's not koine the otzitz. No, Tosfos says he's koine the otzitz, but he needs to do a separate kinyan on the zroim, kinyan chazokah, because it's mechuber karka. And the Ran says, no, they go together. They go together. And as long as he isn't koine the zroim, he isn't koine the otzitz. And the Ran says this is similar to a Gemara in Bava Basra Puv Pevav Midbeis. Kor b'shloishim ani moichalacha. Yochalach zeloi afilo bepruta achroina. So a person sells a certain quantity. I want to buy 10 bushels of wheat, of grain, of oats, or whatever it is. As long as he didn't finish paying for the entire quantity, he could retract. And we don't say, you're kind of 1 bushel, and then the other, then the other, then the other. And even if you didn't finish paying all of them, at least take what you bought. We say no. If I wanted to buy 10 bushels, it's either the entire quantity or nothing. And we assume that when a purchaser wants to buy something, it's either the entire package or nothing. So the Ran says the same when he makes a kinyan in the otzitz. The reason he wants the otzitz is just because he wants the zrom, he wants the plant, he wants the flowers. He wants what's growing in this pot. So you can't say, okay, take the pot, but you still weren't kind of the zroim. Is it the same? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And we could argue in both directions. We could say, kor b'shloishim, it's more mistaver to say, at least take half, take a third, take partially. But a flower pot and the zroim are one, comes together. We could argue to the contrary. The flower pot and the zroim and the plant are 2 different things, essentially, 2 different things. This is karka, this is metaltalin, but this is just a question of quantity. We find a similar machlokes in Kedushin Membeis, and that is source number 9. Person sold a field or a yard. Sold a house with a big backyard, and the backyard is 100 square meters. And when the purchaser checks it out in Tabo, he is shocked to discover that 30 square meters belong to a neighbor, and they don't belong to the seller at all. Then Ashba says, okay, so you got 70 meters. The other 30 is not yours. The Ran says, no. He could retract. He could pull back. And he said, I bought a 100-meter field. I don't want a 70-meter field. It's either the entire field or nothing. Ran l'shitosoi. That's the opinion of the Ran regarding the otzitz and the zroim. Once again, one could argue, this is more similar to kor b'shloishim. We're dealing with quantity. 10 bushels, 100 square meters. It's different than a flower pot and the plant that's in it. It's different, but in a way it's the same. So these 3 sugyas have something in common. Person buys a field, and he is shocked to discover that only part of the field belongs to the seller. Person buys 30 bushels or 20 bushels of something. Would we say you could split up the kinyan? If you didn't finish paying, Or if I don't have the entire quantity, at least take what you bought. Or we would say no. It's either the entire package or nothing. And then Otzitz Vizroim, which is a Machloikis, Taisis and Daran. Otzitz Vizroim, Machloikis, Taisis Ran. So the Gezula, Machloikis, Rashbo and Ran, not exactly the same. But they have in common. So I mentioned, and we visited 10 sites, 10 different sugyas. Number 1 is number 10, and that is the story of Mechiras HaBechorah. So after all we've said, coming back to the Pshat of the Tur, quoting one of the Rishonim. So Yaakov Avinu says, Michlu, Kiyom is Bechoras Choli. Having in mind the Gemara in Bava Metzia Tezayin Amud Aleph. Ma shetala mesedos yayoim mochalacha, ma she'irish ma b'hayoim mochalacha, kono. Is it reasonable to say, Greira, if he's kona hayoim, then the kinyan is chal in the entire package? Maybe yes. Especially if we say, Kniat v'chamor. Why kona machatza? Why some say loy kona klum? Because didn't really have in mind. But Yaakov Avinu clearly has in mind. It's just a chachma, it's just a haroma, but what he has in mind is to buy the entire package. And Esav agrees. V'yivaz Esav is a b'choira. Lo mazeli b'choira. Esav doesn't care. Esav says, okay, give me the nazida dashim and take the b'choira. What do I need the b'choira for? I don't need it. So it does dealing with methodology. So maybe we would say Greira, a positive Greira. Yoisa nera be'enai, that this entire idea doesn't make sense. And because we're dealing with drush, we are entitled to argue. It's not like being choylak hanatur, haloch halamaisa. This is divrei drush, and I think, ma she'irish ma'aba hayoim mochalacha, ma she'tala metzidos hayoim mochalacha, zat kones chachomim. It's still a davar shel boli yolam. Meikar din, this kinyan has no room. Totally invalid. Tikno chachomim mishum kedei chayov. Because this person is selling out of desperation. We need to care for him. We don't want him to die for hunger. He desperately needs this money. And that is the reason the chachomim say kono. If it's a takono, ein lecha boyera chidushay, ein lecha boyera tekantoi. Doesn't work if you have a chachma in mind. So Yaakov actually wants to buy the entire package. He wants the b'choira because he needs the brochas, because he doesn't want Esav to be makrav karbonas. So it's just a chachma to say kayoim. Doesn't fit into the context of the takonas chachamim, and therefore I think medubot lo akinyan lagabe hab'choira, bot lo akinyan gam lagabe hayoim. So the importance of today's shiur is, the breadth, dealing with 10 different sugyas and trying to differentiate and understand and being machalak between one sugya and the other, and briefly analyzing each one of the 10 sources that we dealt with. So the story of Yaakov and Esav starts in this parsha. It's an old story and a never-ending one. And this struggle begins before Yaakov and Esav are even born. Rashi writes, this is a struggle between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. It's a struggle between right and wrong. It's a struggle between Kodesh and Chol. It's a struggle between Kedusha letuma, between Tumah letahara, between pure and impure, between evil and good. It is our struggle, the struggle of every individual, every Jew, the struggle of every tzibur, the struggle of our people, of our nation. And it's not over. It's not over. It won't be over until Mashiach will come. And this struggle began even before Yaakov and Esav were born. So in the past few weeks, we've been studying Maser Avos, Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu. But suddenly, there's a new figure, bursting on the scene, and that is Esav HaRasha. He's there, and he's going to make a lot of trouble. To Yaakov Avinu personally, and the climax will be the struggle between Yaakov and Soroi Shel Esav. It's not only Esav as a human being, not only Esav as a brother, Soroi Shel Esav, Vaya'ovek ish imo yad lo yisashocha. And as Chazal teach us, this is an ongoing struggle, an ongoing battle, and this story will be with us till the end of days. So Esav represents all the bad, all the evil, all the resha, while Yaakov represents kedusha and tahara. So Esav has 1,000 faces. In every generation he appears with a different face. Poishet tzura, v'loivish tzura. Yaakov is always the same. So what are the weapons in Yaakov's hands? What does he have at his disposal? HaKoil koil Yaakov, v'hayedayim yedei Esav. Esav has the power. Esav has Olam Haza. All Yaakov has is his voice. HaKoil koil Yaakov. And the Balaturim says Torah and Tefillah. And that is what we use throughout the ages. That's what kept us going, kept us intact. And the struggle will not be over until Ad Avoi El Adoni Se'iro. Once again, Rashi says, they never met again, Yaakov and Esav. So when was that? It wasn't. It will be in the future. Va'olu Moshiach Bahar Tzion Lishpoit Ezhar Esav. It is only then. And in every generation, what we have is a koil Yaakov. Koil Torah, koil Tefillah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Bechor Mabaya, said, Ten li Yavna v'chachameo. Most of you heard the story I said 1,000 times. When my father first met the Kloser Rebbe in Birkenau and Auschwitz, and he says, we got to talk and learning. If we talk and learning, we'll make it. If we don't talk and learning, we won't make it. Akoel kol Yaakov. Chazal also say, Bizman shakoel kol Yaakov, eini yadayim yedei Esav. And this is an important message. Bizman shakoel kol Yaakov, ein hayadayim yedei Esav. So in our day and age, we were zeicher to come back to Eretz Yisrael. After 2,000 years of dreaming, this generation and the previous one had the unbelievable schus. Yes, we came back to Eretz Yisrael. And for the first time in thousands of years, we're fighting. We hold weapons in our hands. Jews are fighting. We fought before, but we fought in foreign armies and in many wars. Jews fought Jews, and that was the tragedy of Golus. Very well known, especially in World War I, in the Civil War in America. Both sides had many Jews. Jews killed each other. For whom? For whom? For foreign nations. They all hated us. They all hated us. They all did. The French and the Germans. Yeah. The Confederates and the Unionites. And we fought and killed for them. So it's the first time for thousands of years that we're fighting for our brethren. And with amazing siyata d'shmaya, with unbelievable success. But let us not forget for one moment. Bisman shakoel kol Yaakov eina yadayim yedei Esav. Yes, we fight with tremendous siyata d'shmaya. Let us not forget divrei Chazal. Oim doisoy ragleinu b'mlachoma b'schus shayu shalayim shoiskim b'Torah. There's an amazing Tona de Be'Eliyahu. Magen im yira'eh v'romach barbo amelef miYisrael. Posek in Navi. Tony de Belio says, Arbo melef mi Yisrael shiatzu lemelchama, im yesh b'neim zug echad shel talmidei chachamim ani matzi leskulam. 40,000 people, 40,000 Jews go out to war. One zug of talmidei chachamim v'ani matzi leskulam. Magen im yeroa v'roimach barbo melef mi Yisrael. Let me share with you my profound thought. Twice in Shas and Heder Mem Daled, Megillah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, Chazal explain what happened in Sefer Yehoshua. In the midst of battle, Malchemes Mitzvah, Kibush Eretz Yisrael, Yeshua takes a stroll by night, probably trying to air out his head. And suddenly he sees an officer dressed up in a uniform and full gear. He doesn't recognize him, neither is his uniform familiar. Yeshua's baffled and he says, Halonu at imlit sorenu. Which army do you belong to? Are you one of ours or one of them? Halonu at imlit sorenu. I don't know you. You seem to be a senior officer. How come I don't know you? Do you belong to our enemies? I don't recognize your uniform. And the officer says, Loi, ki sar tzavo Hashem onoichi. I am neither lonu nor litzorenu. I'm an angel. And I was sent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to convey a message to you. And Yeshua asks, what is it? And he says, you're in big trouble. Emesh bitaltem tomet shel beinu arbaim vayoim bitaltem en ha-Torah. You're in big trouble. And Yeshua asks, so what is it? Is it bittul karbonos or bittul Torah? And the Malach says, al atu bosi. Rashi explains, bittul Torah. I wasn't there, so I can't recall. But I guess that Yeshua says to his defense, what do you want? What do they want from me up there? It's a Gemara Meforeshes and Soita Mem Daled. Oisik b'mitzvah potam and a mitzvah b'shas melchemes mitzvah were potam and a mitzvah. So what is it? Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu angry with me? And the way I understand it, the Malach says, Yeshua, you don't get it. You don't understand. I was sent min hashamayim not to represent Torah. If I was sent to represent Torah, we'd be wearing a frak and a hamburg like a Rosh Hashiva. I would be wearing a kaftan, a beketcha, and a shtraima like a Rebbe. I'm dressed up in a military uniform with full gear, carrying a machine gun. I was sent not to be toveya el boina shel Torah, but to be toveya el boina shel melchama. How do you think you're going to be successful in this war if you're causing bittul Torah? Jews don't win wars with bittul Torah, the Malach tells Yoshua. This is going to be a tragedy, he tells them. Jews don't win wars with bittul Torah. And that is why you see me dressed up as an officer, not like a Rosh Hashiva, not like a Rebbe. So what does Yeshua do? How does he respond? The Gemara says, "Vayolen betoichu emek melamed shalan beumko shel halacha." We would expect them to make a chevres tehillim, to organize all the ladies and all the girls and the young boys in the community and all the chaydas to say 1,000 times tehillim every day. No, he makes a koilel erev. Vayolen betoichu emek lan beumko shel halacha. And why is that? Why is that? It is only Malchamto Shel Torah that will bring us success b'malchama. And that is why the Navi says, Mogein im Yeroa, v'romach barbo amelach mi Yisrael. Hamagen v'haromach, do you know what they are? The Magen is the shield. And the Romach is an offensive weapon. It's the spear, it's the sword, it's the axe. So thousands of years ago, those were the fundamental klei melchama. You held a shield in your left hand. That is a defensive weapon. and the Ramach in your right hand to kill, to strike. So warfare has evolved 10,000 times since the days of Yeshua ben Nun, since Jews fought the Romans or the Canaanites. But the basic idea of strategy of warfare is the same. And every successful army needs the combination of defense and offense, of defensive weaponry and offensive weaponry. So the shield and the sword evolved into infantry and armor and artillery and planes and missiles and anti-missile missiles and anti-missile missiles and anti-plane missiles and anti-ship missiles and surface to air and air to surface and sea to land and land to sea. But fundamentally it's still the Magen and the Ramach. B'malchamto shel Torah, that's the Makshen and the Tartzen. Offense and defense. The Makshen bears the Ramach, and the Tartzen with the Magen. באומרף מיסול שיוצא למלחמה, זוג אחד של תלמיד החכמים, המגן והרמח, באומרף מישראל. So let us not forget, הכל כל ינקב הידיים ידי יסף, and it is only בזמן שהכל כל ינקב הידיים, אין הידיים ידי יסף. So yes, in our generation we fight, and we fight gallantly and brilliantly, but it is only בזמן שהכל כל ינקב. So we all need to cooperate and dedicate all our times and efforts to our Botzes Torah, to Talmud Torah, and we should be zoicha that this struggle between Yankov and Esav for thousands of years should in our days be resolved. When will that be and how will that be? Va'olo Moshiach Bahar Tzion lishpoit es ha'reisa v'hoisol Hashem ha'malicho ad ovoi el adoini se'iro בביאס גואל צדק ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו יחד במהרה ויומנו אמן.